Hey y'all, it's that time again. It's time for me to sit down and build my own eyeshadow palette out of my eyeshadow singles. This is the last palette that I built, but some drama has happened. I think that it fell on the floor at some point, and I also think that I took a couple of the shades out of here at some point. I can't really remember what happened, but it's in a little bit of a sorry state, so I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to put these shadows back from whence they came, and I'm going to build a new palette which is going to be inspired in part by some of the shadows in these two palettes. I'm also going to be talking about them as we go through. If this is your first time to my channel, then welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Hannah. I love beautiful things. I really like makeup, and I really like using the makeup that I already own. In fact, in this video, what I'm trying to do is to use the makeup that I already own to build my own palette so I don't have to keep these two new palettes that were sent to me in PR because I would rather give them away. That's kind of the gist of what we're doing here. If that kind of makeup and beauty content sounds good to you, I hope you will subscribe. Now let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. This is the Alter Ego Shadow Kiss palette, and this is the Aether Beauty Rose Quartz Crystal palette, which isn't a new release. This one is a new release from Alter Ego. This isn't a new release, but they've re-released it in even more sustainable packaging. So this packaging doesn't have magnets or a mirror, which I think is really cool. They've managed to make it feel really lovely, sturdy, almost luxurious, even without the magnets and the mirror. And both of these were given to me by the brands, sent to me in the mail recently, and I've been enjoying using both of them in particular because of basically one eyeshadow look that I've been doing using one shade from this palette or one shade from this palette. Basically, every time I've sat down to do my eyeshadow over the past couple of weeks, I put one of these two shadows all over my lid. So this one is from the Alter Ego palette, and this one is from the Aether Beauty palette. Again, Alter Ego is on the right, and the Aether Beauty shadow is on the left there. They're not exactly the same, but you can see it's like a vibe, right? It's like a mauvey, grayish, purplish, pale bronze kind of thing, like kind of a cool toned taupe, slightly mauvey taupe with, I think, in both of these, multicolored reflects. I think that there's some kind of like multicolored micro glitter going on here. Because I have so much lovely eyeshadow already, usually when a brand sends me an eyeshadow palette, I give it away. I might swatch it on camera, I might even use it on camera and review it, but I usually end up giving it away. Both of these, though, I've loved using so much that I keep thinking to myself, maybe I should keep this. I keep thinking that about this. I think I might even have said that on camera the first time I used this on camera. And then this one is a more recent acquisition, and every time I've used it, I've thought the same thing. I've been like, wow, I really love the look that I'm getting. Maybe I should keep this. But what I've realized is that I'm doing the same look over and over again. So with the Shadow Kiss palette, I'm just putting this all over my lids, and then I'm using one of these like browns to buff it out, buff out the crease, soften the crease. And then I'm using this dark shade right here, Umbra, to smoke out the outer corner. When I use this one, I'm putting this all over my lid. I'm invariably using either this shade or this shade to soften it and to deepen up the crease. And then there isn't a shade in this palette dark enough for me to smoke out my outer corner. So what I'm usually doing is I'm going over to this palette and getting Umbra and smoking out the outer corner. And the look ends up looking pretty much the same no matter which palette I use, no matter how I do it. And I'm starting to suspect that I might be able to do exactly the same thing, get just as much gratification and love the look just as much from my single eyeshadows. So I'm hoping today that I can build a palette out of singles that will give me everything that these two palettes have been giving me, and then I can happily give both of them away. Okay, I got those shadows put away. I got this little palette cleaned up, and I kept these swatches on my hand because the first thing I'm going to do is look through my singles and maybe through my Natasha Denona palettes too, and see if I have any shadows that really compare to these or might be good stand-ins for these. I think that this is ColourPop Tinker Time. Yeah, it's a discontinued ColourPop metallic. It does have some of those micro glitters in it, but it's not the same. It doesn't have, I just feel like they don't have as much of a presence. And I don't think that they're rainbow at all. And it's more bronze. I'll take it out because it could be in the palette, but it's not like a dupe for either of these. And that one is not even close. That's Mr. Sandman from ColourPop. It just has a lot more pink in it. I think that this is Snake Eyes or Tea Garden? No. No, that's Glass Bull, the iconic ColourPop shadow. Snake Eyes is the one that I actually think was a dupe for one of these. Like that was the shadow that I had that was really similar, and it recently just completely shattered. I think it was actually in that little palette. I'm now remembering. I think that was what happened in that palette. I think it fell on the floor and Snake Eyes completely shattered and I couldn't save it. So it might be that's what I was thinking of, that I would be able to use to dupe one of these shadows. I might not actually have it anymore, but let's look at the square shades. Let's see if there's anything in there. This looks more promising in terms of tone, but I don't think there's anything that's going to have that multicolored glitter, but I might be able to create it. This is coming a little closer. I really like that, and I actually like how dark it is. That's kind of like, that's definitely too purple and too pale. This is more of a raisin color, not quite the thing. That's actually closer, although it's more purple than either of them, not quite a taupe. Yeah, I think this is the only one of these square shades that even comes close. It's this one right here, and it comes the closest, and it's closer to this one than this one. And if I were picking between them, this is the one that I like slightly better. I remember that for a long time, I loved layering this shade, this sort of blue-brown topper, over top of that taupe shade that I just pulled. That's that. I just did a little soft swatch of it. So that's with like the blue layered over it. And, you know, it actually departs a bit from the effect of these, but it adds some interest, you know. So I pulled that one as well because I think I might end up including it in the palette. What about this? That's Natasha Denona Sienna. It definitely has like a ruddy undertone rather than this like taupe. And this Cleona shade, it's going to be much more dynamic, but I might not be sorry to have that out. Let's look in the Natasha Denona. Let's look in the Lila palette, and maybe I'll come back here if I don't feel like I've found enough. So again, these are the original two shades in here, and I actually don't think anything here is as neutral as they are, although some of these might be really good for the matte shades, because some of these matte shades are kind of similar to the ones that I keep reaching for. Like I keep using this one in the Aether Beauty palette, but I do wish that it were a little more neutral. So like a little bit more like this, or even this. Not that this is more neutral, but it's more exciting to me. And in this palette, I'm reaching for these browns, which are cooler toned than this. And, you know, darker than this, but I feel like I want to pull this one. I can't find my depotting tool and I'm really struggling. I'm going to look for it again really quickly. Man, I feel like that depotting tool is just everywhere, all up in my business until the moment that I need it, and then it's gone. But I found this pair of tweezers, so I'm going to use it. Okay, Kava and Sparks are obviously two of my most used eyeshadows. I think it makes a lot of sense to include them in this palette because here is Sparks layered over that sort of like raisin colored shimmer from the palette of Square Singles. It's one of the shades, the underneath shade is one they didn't end up pulling. But you can see how putting that sheer sparkly shadow on top of it, it kind of mimics the sparkle of this and even of this, but especially the way that the silver sparkle is dispersed here, it kind of mimics that. So I feel like layering them, maybe even mixing them and layering them over these kind of like taupey gray purples, I think I might really be able to come close to the look that I've been getting with those other palettes. All right, these are all looking good, and there's room for one more. And in deciding what's going to go there, let's break down what we have here. So we have 4 shades here, which I feel like are the kinds of shades that I'll put all over my lid. When I'm building an eye look, a lot of times what I do is I open a palette, I pick one shade that I want to be the base of the look all over my eyes, and I put it all over my lids and blend it out. And then I go in with some other shades and I build some infrastructure around. So I like blend the crease a little bit, soften it, and then I layer stuff on top of it if I want it to be more shiny or more textured. So I have 4 base shadow shades, like the ones that I'll go in with first. And then I have 5 infrastructure shades. So ones that could go in the crease, ones that could layer on top. Although actually this right here, even though it doesn't look like it in the pan, is kind of a topper itself. It can be the basic shade all over a lid, but I actually use it more as a topper because it's pretty sheer. I do love that wet look shine. I bet it would be really, really pretty by itself all over the lids, and I'm sure that I'll try that in the coming days. But because it's got this sheer quality, this kind of like glossy quality, I don't think of it as like a base pigment for a look, like one that I just want to dig into and slap all over my lids and then like build stuff around. I think of it more as one that adds texture. I think of it more as a topper. So what I definitely want to do is find another base shade, another one that'll be like the fundamental underlying shadow in a look, because all these 6 are infrastructure. And I think that I might want it to be more bronze, like a little bit more bronze than either of the 2 original inspo shades. Yeah, sorry, not sorry. It's just going to be this, the most neutral bronze from the gold palette. Ooh, I like this. I know that it's very neutral and very, I don't know, it may be one of those ones that looks kind of boring when you look at it, even though the looks themselves won't be boring. I know that that's the case, but I feel very, very excited by this right now, just because it's what I'm into like this week. You know what I mean? It's like what I want to do right now, except that I feel like there are some dynamics here that aren't present in these 2 inspo palettes, especially not this one, right? Because this one's super neutral and almost completely cool toned. So there's this matte, this like rosy matte that's adding some blushy warmth that this palette doesn't have. And there's this really wild card here that's adding some like sheeny blue brown that this palette doesn't have. And this one right here too has a ruddy undertone that comes out when it's swatched that this palette doesn't have. So I feel like what this has is everything that I've been getting from here and more. But I just realized when I opened this and started looking at it that what this palette doesn't have is something that will function the way that Umbra functions. And I feel like Umbra has been a real cornerstone of the looks I've been doing with this palette. I'm going to need to find something like that because I really do need it. All right, the thing that kind of comes closest, although it's more purple, is this shade here in the Lila palette, but It's starting to go, this palette, especially some of these shades, they're just starting to not perform as well as they used to. It's several years old, and I just don't feel like wrestling with this shade today or this week right now. I don't want that to be my only option. I think I'm gonna get the dark brown out of the gold palette, but it's much more of a warm toned brown than Umbra. I don't actually really have anything like Umbra in my collection of singles, which is something that I'm learning today. All right, I was feeling excited by this kind of rosy matte. Oh, and it's kind of dark. So maybe I could also use it to deepen up the outer corner some. I think that I want to keep this because of its color and its depth, and I want to keep this because of its neutrality. This one's like a little more purple, so I can let that one go and replace it with this dark brown. Okay, so this is what we are left with. Let's swatch it out. Okay, so I feel like this brown shade from the gold palette is actually looking less warm and a little bit darker than I was expecting it to in the swatch. I think it will probably function as something much more similar to Umbra from the Shadow Kiss palette than I thought that it would. Natasha Denona mattes do tend to run darker in application and swatch than they look in the pan. I had forgotten that for a moment. Ooh, I like it. I feel like it's kind of rainbowy in its own way. There's like a reddish color. There's some, these bronzes aren't even close to being orange, but you know what I mean? There's something like gold. So like red, orangey gold, yellowy gold, red, orange, yellow. There's a little bit of blue green in here, and there's blue in here, and there's definitely some purple. So there's sort of this like quirky, pastel-y, slightly grungy rainbow, but it's not a rainbow palette. You would never say that. I just feel like there's more color in it than I was expecting there to be. It's reading to me as something that in its own way is colorful rather than being totally neutral. Even though the looks that I've been doing have felt more like straight up cool toned neutral looks. And that's what inspired this. It ended up having more color than I thought that it would based on the inspiration. And I do think that I probably will be able to get that kind of shimmery version of this like soft taupe, especially as I was saying before, by layering these sparkly shades over these base shades. So something like that, something like that right there, maybe even a little bit of this as a topper, as a layering shade. Something like that is going to be really pretty, slightly amped up, but very similar to what I've been doing, like the amped up version of what I've been doing. Love that. And what if we put this over like this matte, or mixed it with this matte? That's going to bring out more of the blue. And what if we put this over like the brown? Oh my gosh, that really brings out the kind of greeny blue in that. Like I wasn't expecting to be able to get a color like this from this palette, but there it is. I realized when I was trying to build this palette that I don't actually have like a straight up dupe for Shroud from this Alter Ego palette, which is what I was hoping to find. I was hoping to find a shade that looks pretty much exactly like this in among my singles. And I do think I used to have one. I think that I used to have a ColourPop shade, as I was saying. And I feel like I might have even had like an old Urban Decay shade that was kind of like this that I decluttered. Anyway, there's nothing here now that's exactly like this, but I think that what I've learned in doing this and like building this little palette is that I don't have to have an exact dupe to this in order to get looks that are really the same look that I've been getting, right? In order to get like, I feel like this all over the lid or that all over the lid is going to pretty much be just like that all over the lid. And I can do that using what I already own. So it was interesting to go through the process of being like, wait a second, this actually is unique to my collection. Maybe I should keep it. You know, but then kind of like coming full circle to the place of being like, well, it might be unique to my collection, but it doesn't mean that the looks that I would do with it are exclusive to, you know, keeping this palette. The thing that will really drive that home though for me and affirm it, if it is totally true, is using this palette over the next couple of weeks. And at the end of the life of this little palette, like after I've used it and used it and used it, then I will decide whether I feel like I've been missing the Alter Ego Shadow Kiss palette or the Aether Beauty palette, missing them for the looks that I get with them, or if I'm happy just passing them on. And that is it. That's this build your own palette video. This was such a fun one, and I really like the palette that I ended up with. I hope it was just as much fun for you to watch, and I really hope that you're taking extra good care of yourself today so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.